times and probably, retain more. My reading comprehension and retention is on the lower side of things.
Tell me about your history of studying Buddhism.
Well, I took that 5-week course with you a couple years ago.
Okay.
And before that, it just kind of was like, it was reminiscent of, the Yoga Sutras and that practice. And then it just, as I guess, received some of the Buddhist teachings and the Yoga Sutras, it just all meshed with the way that I was raised. It resonated on that level. I was like, oh yeah, I understand this already in more layman's terms. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so how did your parents introduce you to it, or your guardians?
Yeah, my mom she introduced me to meditation when I was like 4 years old. So really young. And it wasn't something I practiced throughout my childhood, but yeah, I think it just underlined the wisdom that she passed along to me. It was just like, treat others as you wish to be treated. Be in touch with your experience, trust in your experience. To be of service to yourself is to be of service to others, and vice versa. She just, taught me to do good and, to be a loving person. And
that's wonderful. Second generation, and I would consider you have a second generation introduction to Buddhist thought, and that's always different than your parents. It's almost always reactionary in the sense that as teenagers or as young people are wont to do, they rebel or reject what their parents have, or they embrace it and go deeper. And I sense you've embraced it and gone deeper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say so too.
That's meaningful, and I think as parents, we are always thankful when our kids go deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fun.
Yeah. I think there was other parts of parenting that I rejected, and but there was a lot of her, what I would just call wisdom, that I interjected, and that catered to a really like positive and uplifting outlook and demeanor in my life.
Thank you. Walk me through what, just reading sort of Religions of the World on Buddhism, was there anything that caught your attention, that whether you wrote about it or not, just how did this reading hit you?
Yeah. Well, the two things that I picked to write about, one of them was
just a minute, I got
about,
a phone call.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Williams speaking. Hi, Kate. I was wondering if you were going to come in on the phone because of instructions. Have you got your Zoom running? Oh, okay. Do you have Zoom running? So you want to go to zoom.com. Oh, that's great. Okay, then it's going to ask you for a room number, and that's 886-4003 7232. So it's a total of 11 digits there. Okay, let's try it again. 886 4003 7232. And in upper and lower case, McCall, as you would normally do it. M small c, large C A L L 2020. No space anywhere. McCall 2020. There you are. Okay, you're here, and we'll hang up now, and you can pick it up on the phone. Okay, you bet. Thanks for calling. There we go.
Okay.
Okay, iPhone's coming in. Great. Now.
Okay.
There she is.
I see you guys.
Did you send me a message also, or was Colton trying to get through?
No, I did message you.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you. Now, the good news is that Ian can hear you clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yeah, and I can see her too.
Finally.
That's great. How's your screen, Kate? Is that working?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's delivering it? You bet.
Yep, I see.
Just had a good conversation with Ian about how he's sort of a second generation with some Buddhist thought in his world, and we've heard your story, and so it's always intriguing how our backgrounds contribute to our time together. And so now there was one little point you mentioned, Kate, this week that I want to sort of clarify. You said that you're busy doing wedding preparations. Now I'm not sure I caught what the date was for all of that. What's your future look like?
Yeah, so my sister is getting married on Tuesday. We are working on getting all of the wedding decorations together, and I'm the maid of honor for her. So just down here in Salt Lake with my family. We're getting ready for the wedding. It's exciting.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
I interpreted those were your wedding celebrations. Oh. So that's what I was trying to go, oh, I think I missed something here.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So just wanted to make sure we acted well as to whatever information was coming our way. And
yeah.
That's just fine. And I assume, so is Colton joining us tonight or not? Do you know?
I haven't heard from him all day, to be honest, and I called him, haven't heard from him, so I don't think so.
That's thank you. And so we'll just go with the assumption that he may not be able to join us. So
yeah, I think
alrighty.
They were doing some stuff.
I don't know if you got the email as far as the slides. Did you get that, or are you just sort of gonna wing it without notes tonight?
I have a notebook here. I couldn't get my laptop to work. It died. I'm out in the trailer outside my parents' house. So
but you've got your notebook with the itemized summaries that you've got something to work with?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll
be okay.
That'll help. Ian said that he had a chance to pile through the text. Did you have a chance to pile through the text on Buddhism this week?
Mm-hmm. I did read. Yep.
Okay. Good. And so I was just beginning to ask what was intriguing, what were you writing on, what were you thinking of writing on if your life went crazy this week?
Yeah, I didn't get to write yet, but.
How come I could have guessed that?
What was that?
How come I could have guessed?
Oh, yeah.
Let me there we go. Okay.
I did have some stuff that I found interesting, though.
Good. Talk about one idea.
Let's see. I really liked this section in, it's called I Am a Buddhist. It's on page 246 for me. But he says, if suddenly there is a mountain in front of me, whether literally or figuratively, I can either sit down defeated or start climbing upwards step by step. It is only by climbing a mountain that one becomes a good mountain climber. The same is true of every human situation. I can only become a more compassionate person by acting compassionately, a good leader by leading well, a good follower by learning to give loyalty to those who have been appointed to lead. And just like the reality of that sentence, it really speaks to the Buddhist way of seeing things as they are. You have to practice to get good at doing any given thing. And I just thought that was a really illuminating statement.
It's the great gift of Buddhism, is that sense of seeing who you are in the present. As you can sense, you're living in the future. You're trying to get to a wedding, and that forces you really to live into the future. Buddhism forces you to rethink that often, and if not always. Ian, what's your response? And take us through an idea that you were intrigued with.
Okay. Yeah, I also really enjoyed that entry from, I think it was Paul Seto. You were just reading from? Yeah, I really like that. In relation to what you just read and what Brian was just speaking about, I think, part of the view is Brian said it was like looking at yourself and who you are in this moment, and then looking at reality for what it really is. And I think it allows us to have this, to look at challenge as a place of opportunity, really. So I find that supportive.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Let's see. I think one of the greatest ideas of Buddhism that resonates with me is the vows of the Bodhisattva. And this undertaking of not just seeking enlightenment and liberation for self, but in light of, all sentient beings. And I just think it's a really powerful intention to like infuse even the smallest thought or action with that, it supports, self-care and what I do to take care of myself so that I can show up in service to others even better. And then any service that I offer to those around me, or just maintaining a clean space, also serves me as well. So I just really like the depth and the dynamic of that vow of Bodhisattva.
Thank you. I'd like to begin tonight with this prayer that is found in the book that I've invited you to read. And this time you'll be reading with me, as I have not had the time to read it prior to class. I was just impressed with it when I picked it up and thought it was the best that I could add to my library that might help us in the class. And so I'll be responding as you have responded in Hinduism as a new reading. And I'd like to begin, and this is the Awakening the Buddha. And I'm going to read it 3 times as a meditation. I'd like for you to find the one idea that is most meaningful to you after I have read it, and then come back to it. The chapter is called We Are All Buddhas. May all beings everywhere, with whom we are inseparably interconnected, be fulfilled, awakened, and free. May there be peace in this world and throughout the entire universe. And may we all together complete the spiritual journey. May all beings everywhere with whom we are inseparably interconnected be fulfilled, awakened, and free. May there be peace in this world and throughout the entire universe. And may we all together complete the spiritual journey. May all beings everywhere with whom we are inseparably interconnected be fulfilled, awakened, and free. May there be peace in this world and throughout the entire universe. And may we all together complete the spiritual journey. What idea comes to mind out of that?
I think that's such a beautiful prayer. And I mean, I just think of my family, honestly, being down here with them right now. You know, seeing their day-to-day struggles that I now am not a part of anymore because I'm in Idaho. Or, you know, I mean, I'm with them in spirit, but being here is totally different. And I wish all of those things for my family, absolutely, because I'm here.
Thank you, Kate. Ian?
What ideas come to mind? It sounds bodhisattva-like.
Mm-hmm. Very much.
For sure. And I think it's a wonderful acknowledgement of how we're all interconnected, and the potential and the potential power of everybody rising together and learning together and learning from each other.
I enjoyed that word together a lot, having read it many times today. I'm not sure,
thank you for sharing.
as an American, for my case, North American, that we understand the spiritual journey is togetherness. I think we're very profound creatures of individualism, and our spiritual journey often is that of an individual. And this author, in his writing, is acting like an individual, trying to find that mountain in the Himalayas that he can find his spiritual answers to life. And he becomes a community of people that are seekers. And so he transforms that idea of individualism, not explicitly, but you can see it in his writing, to that of meeting other people that are going to be spiritual journeyers with him. Pilgrims is often the term we use. And so that concept, I'm glad you resonated with, Ian. And I think you were saying a similar thing, Kate, with your family. You're sensing that togetherness and the reality of life together is spiritual life together. And I look forward to how that will impact you. I'm going to take you to what my sense of what the Buddha defined as enlightenment. And at some point I'll read it, but I just want to sort of paraphrase it right now. And the paraphrase is that enlightenment is to stop becoming and to be. To stop becoming and to be. And again, that infuses all of our conversation, even so far tonight. Worrying about the future is becoming. Recognizing the relationships you're having right now and talking with those around you is being. And some of us are horribly trapped in the past, and we keep putting our past and the struggles and the suffering and the frustrations of the past, and we keep dragging them into the present. Some of us thoroughly enjoy the future, and our head is in the clouds, and we're always running into the future, trying to find that which the future holds. But the Buddha had a wonderful way of grounding us and saying, be in the moment, be in the present, be as a singular word. And that task is so challenging that they call it enlightenment. And so its difficulty is now set before us. How do we find that particular result? How do we live in the moment? How do we be? How do we rest into that? And that becomes the journey that the Buddha is calling to us tonight. And it is a marvelous journey. Final thoughts?
I guess maybe what you just said made me think of this little scripture that is throughout the textbook. I really like this textbook actually because it puts little bits of scripture, and then also it has the accounts of actual people from the faith. I really appreciate that. But it says, it's in the historical overview, hatred is never quenched by hatred. By non-hatred alone is hatred quenched. This is an eternal law. And I guess that doesn't really have to do with being, but for some reason, I guess I just needed to share that. So somehow that connected for me, but then I was like, no, it doesn't. So,
Well,
maybe it's, I guess what it was is it's the becoming versus the being, I don't know, being grounded here in the present. You wouldn't want to have hatred and cultivate that. Really, I mean, people do, but okay, we can move on from this.
Somehow we've got to get Kate to settle down here. She's having way too much stimulation. But it's a joy to be around you, that's for sure. As we enter into Buddhism, and for Ian, you've worked with me on this topic before, and I'm honored you're working with me again. I'm always intrigued when I reteach a class because I'm the #1 learner. I thoroughly enjoy learning from my students, learning from rereading the text, learning from a new text. I hope my prayer is that I don't bore you. I don't think I will. I think there's so much that has happened between the last time we talked about this and what we're talking about now that I hope you'll find this to be meaningful. It's going to be a little tougher. I'm going to be a little more, hopefully challenge you more. And the way I want to begin that challenge is, first of all, to give you a way out. I want you to be patient with yourself. Buddhism makes lots of demands, nowhere near as much of a demand as Jainism, but it makes a lot of demands. I want to encourage you that if we're beginning a path today, that it's going to take 40 days for you to do something new in your life. But I'm gonna wonder if you'll just do some markers of re-identity. I like to live that religion which I'm teaching, and so for the Thursdays that we're studying Buddhism, I'm going to try and wear yellow or orange, just as a marker. I'm going to see if I can remember. I can imagine I'm going to show up next week and I won't have done it. And I'll be embarrassed. So I'm already living in the future and I've lost the present. But my goal, and I would encourage you, is to wear yellow and orange one day a week. And why do I pick those two colors? Does someone want to give me a clue on what I'm thinking?
I forget their significance in Buddhism, but I know they relate.
They do. It often is the color of the monks. And so it's often the dress that you will see is their robes are often yellow or orange. And like all religions, I'm sure you can find a purple Buddhist. But that's typically they will wear yellow or orange when they're in robes. And so that helps us to identify with that which we're studying. And so I'd encourage you to do it. I'd encourage you to take fruit to the food bank once per week or something. Take fruit to someone. If the food bank isn't convenient, purposefully set aside some fruit and give it to someone else. They'll wonder why. Have a conversation. But that sheer act of giving is the foundation of the Buddhist journey of giving that shows at what we saw was often in the Hindu shrines, in the homes. But for the Buddhists, they often go to their temples and bring fruit with them. So I'd like to encourage you to give fruit to others as often as you can, at least once a week. Does that sound like a fair challenge?
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I think you guys are pretty good at the next one. I'd like for you to meditate once a day. I'm the one that needs that work. So I will see how good I can be at slowing down and allowing that to happen. So I'd like for you to meditate once a day. And to walk in the Buddhist way is to act with loving kindness wherever possible. What I like to, most people would, often when I ask students to do this, they'll give me the response, well, I always do that. That's just who I am. Well, I'd like you to be explicit, at least this week. I want you to do it this way. Whoever is the next person you meet after we click off, act with loving kindness. I want you to have a little golf counter in your an imaginary golf counter in your hand. And when you finish interacting with whoever that person is, if you acted in loving kindness, click 1. If you didn't act with loving kindness, set it back to 0. Go to the next person. After that interaction, click or go to 0. After that interaction, click or go to 0. Now, what I'd like for you to do next week is how many interactions in a row did you have without resetting your clicker back to 0? It's quite a challenge. Okay? Again, I've thrown you into the future, so we'll try and keep you in the present. But I'd like for you to begin doing that and just try and be in the present immediately after you do something with someone else. How well are you doing? And I'll have some questions for you next week as we try and sort through this. This week, again, we've been watching movies. There's lots of books that we can be looking at. Buddhism has a wonderful array of books. And so I'd be asking you to do that. Didn't know if anybody with Colton would be here tonight, so I had 4 or 5 that I've got in my library that I tossed around the table. I'll show you guys when you get here. Okay, so there might be other assignments that are these formal academic assignments, and we'll talk about those at the end. But are you okay with my challenge to do these ones?
Mm-hmm. I appreciate the challenge.
Okay. Kate, what do you think?
I think it's great. I love I like taking flowers to people. I'm sure fruit would be great too.
Flowers is wonderful as well. No, flowers count.
Okay. Yeah, and actually, on my drive down yesterday, I stopped at a gas station and the guy in front of me didn't have enough money in his account to pay for his donut, and so I bought it for him.
Oh, wonderful.
I was
Oh, that's
behind
just
him in line. Yeah.
how come that seems to be right in your wheelhouse when it comes to how you act?
Yeah.
I've had a good week this week too on some of those stories. It's been a fun. Okay, so sorry if yellow or orange isn't your favorite color, but if you'd sort of work with me on this, I'd appreciate it. And we'll continue. Oh, as far as some of the other things, I'd asked you, and Kate, I saw I had a chance to take a look at your project. That looks superb. Please launch that.
Okay.
An email with just some comments is coming. But the nub of it is go for it. Ian, have you had a chance to think about a project?
Yeah, and I did actually submit it. So what I'm thinking about doing, and are we going to do one per religion, or are we just going to do one for the semester?
One per semester is fine.
Okay.
Which way did you answer the question?
For one
Thank
per
you.
semester.
Then you're fine.
Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna focus and elaborate on relationships in the context of Hinduism, specifically long-term, intimate, monogamous relationship, and how the presence of Hinduism influences and affects that, positively, negatively.
Wow. Sounds wonderfully productive. Sounds very difficult to research. Do you have a sense of your research path?
Well, I have a friend who is from India who left her marriage. She left her arranged marriage of 20-something years because it was abusive. And so I think it's a really insightful path to interview her, because not only is she cultured to be there for the men, the father, the sons, so forth. That she's always in service to a man at some point in her life, starting with her father. But that the men also have this expectation of the women, and a certain potentially abusive or neglectful means that the culture promotes towards women.
Excellent.
And I'm not saying that's across the board, but it definitely strikes a curious chord for me.
Enjoy the journey. I'd love for you also to when you find, I think interviews are always quality. I mean, those are really good sources of data. Try and find some academic work in this area, and I'm sure psychology is just as rich in India as it is in America. You might have to go down that path. And so anyway, I'll be intrigued to see where your research also takes you. So
yeah, thank you.
So that's great. And Kate, would you share with Ian what your plan is?
Yeah, so I would like to write on Ayurveda and just well, can I grab my paper real quick? I'll be able to put it a lot better for you here. Okay. Well, I guess I didn't make it in my folder. The gist of it is that...
Do you want me to read it? Would that help you if I read it?
Sure, if you can access it. I'm all out of sorts.
Okay. Ayurveda is the ancient Indian medicine tradition. I would like to do my Journeys of Transformation supplement project on Ayurveda. I would like to learn more about how Hindus heal the sick. What is their medicine? What are the plants, prayers, and practices that they use? How does this practice tie in with overall health? So you'll cover a brief history, the basic principles, and there's the 5 elements and some other elements to it, the therapies and systems. Okay, and she gave me two sources. So good start. So do you want to build on any of that? Well, I would like to know, how'd you get there? Where'd you find it, and what was the starting point for you?
Well, I was exposed to Ayurveda in my 200-hour teacher training for the first time, and it really boggled my mind. I didn't understand it. I didn't like it either. And I think over the years I've been learning more about it here and there. I'll hear a thing or two, and I've even started to maybe do a couple Ayurvedic practices myself, but they are far and few between. So I just really want to learn more, and because because I do healing work, I love to learn more about how anybody finds healing, because there's many paths for healing. This is very interesting.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So way to go. It was a similar request of yours, is watch your research and push your research hard. And it's a little more classical in your field. I think it'll come naturally. Excuse me. And so that would be my only thought, was push your research harder. And it may be tough. Again, you're dealing with other languages and everything else, but my hope is you'll find some good sources and you'll be able to drop into it. Any comments to Kate, Ian?
Yeah, I really, I look forward to hearing what you dig up, because I'm curious about Ayurveda as well. And what I do know about it is, I think, supportive in my reality of just being a holistic means of supporting one's health. So, and it kind of inspired me to draw in the health aspect to how Hinduism supports or doesn't support healthy relationships. So,
yeah,
I'm really enjoying the way you're weaving your two courses together. So I think that's wonderfully valuable for you. And
yeah,
is that other course lasting the entire time we're together, or what's its duration?
Yeah, this year will last until May or June, and it's ongoing. Like I'll probably be attending and hopefully working for that school for the next few years to come.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you. Off we go.
All right.
So 2 pictures are in front of you. What are you seeing? What are you seeing in those 2 pictures?
The Buddha.
I see 2 pictures.
I see a man.
Are you identifying both as the Buddha?
I was, yes.
Okay, both as the Buddha. Thank you. Kate, what are you seeing?
Well, I mean, I see a more regular looking man, and then the gold Buddha is very fancy, and it's a lot more of a joyful expression on his face. He's wearing robes that are fancy. Just looks a lot more lavish on the right, compared to our just average looking man on the left.
When I visited the Chinese Buddhist temple in Portland, the one on the right was the main figure in one of the central areas of veneration. And so I was struck by that, because having studied the Buddha's life, I couldn't figure out how he could be fat. It's my non-progressive language here, but he just sort of struck me as fat. And I couldn't figure out how that worked, as to how in anybody's thinking could the Buddha have been fat? And so that was one of the things that bothered me. What are some of the other things that, as you look at them, what are the distinct differences between these pictures?
I felt like the Buddha on the left was more formal than the Buddha on the right. Like its posture, hand mudras, the facial expressions, like image of discipline and tranquility, whereas the Buddha on the right is like just comfortable. He's laughing. He's like portraying this image of joyful being, and I get the impression like that the Buddha on the left is like more like mainland or India imaging, and like the Buddha on the right is like Japanese or Chinese.
Excellent.
This is the feeling that I get.
Excellent. What are the hand signals? What are the figures' identity marks that communicate something? What are you seeing in any of the imagery that is trying to communicate with you?
Yeah, I forget what the specific mudras are. I can see in the image on the left, the right hand is middle finger to thumb, and then the lower hand is index to thumb.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can see the left hand on the Buddha on the right, his pinky is kind of sticking out.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe the right hand kind of clasps over the knee, but maybe the right index and thumb are touching.
Okay, good identity. Kate, what are you seeing in the two pictures as far as the symbolism? What are they trying to portray to you? How are you reading it?
Well, it looks like...
Sorry, this is hard in the phone, I'm sure.
Oh, you're good. I know. Yeah. I'm like squinting, trying to see. The one on the left, he looks a lot more directive. Like he's giving some kind of maybe direction or message with his hands. And then the one on the right is maybe more casual. He seems more laid back about it. It's more of a relaxed hand positioning. That's what I'm seeing.
Excellent. Okay. And so Ian was trying to read the hand signs, and that's very important in Buddhism. Because virtually every temple, every statue that you'll encounter, the statue will be using a hand sign, and so we'll be wanting to be sensitive to that. Because if you're an adherent arriving in a temple, an awful lot of the meaning would come through the hand signs. If you look at the Buddha on the left, when the hand is middle finger to thumb, what it's saying from the icons that I've studied is that it's trying to say, ward off evil and get rid of demons and negative energy. And the left hand, which is in the horizontal position, again, the circle is being offered explicitly there. The left hand means never-ending flow of energy. And so I have no idea what the hand signs are in the right one, Ian. That was, you identified that there's some distinctive marks that the that they're making. There's some clear signs that this is being portrayed as a Buddha. What's the clearest sign that this is a Buddha image? Both of them are Buddha images. What's the clearest sign that you can see?
Seated posture.
Posture.
I would say.
Yeah. So they're seated. Another clear sign of a Buddha nature. The ears. The elongated ears are and both of them carry them, are a symbol of the Buddha nature within. Now, to identify them, the one on the left is a representation of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. The one on the right, which is interesting because this is the one you see in most American homes. If you're going to see a statuary of the Buddha, you're probably going to see the fat Buddha, or as other people call it, the happy Buddha. That's what you're going to see. But here's that person's story. He was a Chan monk. His name was Chitzu, or Kuitzi, from Fenghua, in what is now the province of Zhejiang. Chitzu was an eccentric but much-loved character who worked small wonders, such as predicting the weather. Chinese history assigned the date of 907 to 923 Common Era to Chitzu's life, so he didn't live very long, which means he lived considerably later than the Siddhartha Gautama, the true Buddha. According to tradition, before the Chitzu died, he revealed himself as the incarnation of Maitreya Buddha. Maitreya is named in the Tripitaka as the Buddha of a future age. Chitsu's last words were, Maitreya, true Maitreya, reborn innumerable times from time to time, manifested among men. The men of the age do not recognize him. And so the tales of Chitsu spread throughout China, and he came to be called the Budai, which means hempen sack. He carries a sack with him full of good things, such as treats for children. He's often pictured with children. And so Putai represents happiness, generosity, and wealth. And he is a protector of children as well as the poor and the weak. Today, a statue of Putai, which is often found near the entrance of Chinese Buddhist temples. The tradition of rubbing Putai's belly for good luck is a folk practice, however, not a genuine Buddhist teaching. It is indicative of Buddhism's broad tolerance of diversity, that this laughing Buddha of folklore is accepted into official practice. For Buddhists, any quality that represents Buddha nature is to be encouraged, and the folklore of the kind, laughing Buddha is not regarded as any kind of sacrilege, even though people unwittingly may confuse him with Siddhartha Gautama. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I found that to be a wonderful introduction to Buddhism, as to there is so much Buddha nature in the story and so much love in the story. There's that clear discipline on the left. There's that joy and generosity, and I have a full tummy, and life is good on the right. There's a story of the ages from over 3,000 years ago, and there's a story of almost a Santa Claus in Chinese literature. And so it's this, and yet, you know, woe to you if you talk to somebody about Buddhism and say, oh, that isn't the real Buddha, the happy Buddha. I think you'll have a challenging time to talk people through it, because it's very identified with Buddhism and who the Buddha was. So it is a journey, but the two pictures are of two different people. And yet we're all called to be Buddha, and as the story, or as the book will work with, awakening the Buddha within, that expectation that Buddha is within all of us. But the ancient story we're going to talk about is the image on the left. Final comments?
I just think it's interesting that yeah, one culture finds their own like icon for the religion, you know, and doesn't identify with maybe the originating icon or image of the Buddha. But they choose something that like that their culture more or less like resonates with. It seems like.
Thank you. And you're quite right. Your Indian influence on the photograph and the Chinese influence, I think, has had a tremendous impact on how people use it. So, well identified.
Yeah, and same with the image of Christ. You know, he's portrayed as this white Spaniard that was actually, I think, reminiscent of one of the conquistadors' sons or something. And when they were conquering the world and, you know, setting up missions, that was the image that they chose.
Yes. My wife has done numerous images of the Christ. And so fascinating how artists work with that. Yeah, who they pick. You can almost assume that the one on the left was a noble's son, somehow, that he used as a model for the painting. And also notice the orange cloth that's representative of the Buddha. So there's our orange again. Let's keep going. Modern Buddhism in Asia, and as you look at it, let your eye focus on India. As we've already talked about, not much. There's a little bit of orange that seeps into the north central parts of India and along the borders, but there's very little. And so we'll talk about the three types of Buddhism, but you're seeing that Buddhism is very much, really almost centered within China, but then also Nepal, and then very, very much in the southern Far East, in Thailand and in those countries down through Vietnam. And so Sri Lanka, you see in very much in red. And so there's some interesting lessons to learn on how a religion starts somewhere and moves. And Buddhism is a religion that moves, and we're going to have to want to study how it moves and why it moves, because it very much is a religion on the road. Comments on Buddhism in Asia?
I want seeing if I'm reading the text is even small on my screen, but Vajrayana, Mahayana, and Theravada.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Is your orange, yellow, and red.
Yeah.
And so we'll be studying what are called the vehicles of Buddhism, and so those are important to sort of get a sense of how the various vehicles of Buddhism organize in the various nationalities that are represented on that map as well. So our regional distribution, when you look at Buddhism, the great big orange circle to the right, boy, that number is too small for me. Looks like 481 million. Let me get that.
That's right.
481 million are in the Asia Pacific region. Europe with 1 million. Middle East, 500,000. Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, 150,000. Latin America, 400,000. North America, second largest region, 3.8 million. So outside of India, North America has had a pretty significant sense of Buddhist influence. And yet it's still, as of these numbers, are still 3 to 4 million. And so it's still small in the scale of religions in North America. Comments on distribution?
It's really popular here in North America.
It is.
Interesting.
Yeah. We're going to discover what kind of Buddhism. We were discovering there were three vehicles of Buddhism. American Buddhism, I would consider to be Zen Buddhism, which is more Japanese in its influence. And we'll talk about why. America always adjusts religions. It always tends to water down religions. It's just part of the American experience with religion. And Zen Buddhism was the most interesting to most Americans. We'll have to discover why it did, and why classic Buddhism really doesn't function well in America. It's Japanese religions. And so that's interesting, but I'll just cue you on that as well. And Buddhism in Boise. And so went through and tried to find the various Buddhist center. I found 5 on the map. The first one was Vietnamese. The second one, Compassion and Insight Center, Heart of the Dharma. We're going to have to discover what Dharma means, because Dharma means something different in Buddhism than it does in Hinduism. So we'll have to figure out what the distinctions are. And we have the Boise Institute for Buddhist Studies. So they're explicit with their Buddhism. And I don't have the names of the other 2. I think they're too small for me. Maybe it's just
Brian?
3. Yeah.
Do you know, or have you met or heard of Dr. Michael Sapiro?
That name is familiar. Where's the question come from?
Well, he resides down in Boise, and he spends time teaching at Esalen, which is out here on the coast in Big Sur. But he has, I felt like he created a Sangha down in Boise, and I'm not finding the name of it, but just curious if.
Sorry. Yeah, no, it would be in another context then that I had the name Shapiro in my mind. I don't recall him for that reason. Keep looking for it. Again, the good news is there are some. The other thing that I need to research is if there's any Chinese temples. I've seen them, but I've never gone to visit any in Boise. In Portland, I made a practice of visiting every Buddhist temple I could find. And they had Chinese, they had Tibetan, there was quite a number. And then it was a great joy always to draw the Buddhist monks into class if they could speak English. And so therefore I met many of them. I haven't had the same opportunity here in Idaho. And I look forward to do that if I could. Okay.
I found the name of it. It's Maitri Sangha. I'm typing it in the chat right now so you can see the spelling of it.
Thank you.
Yeah. He's a really well-studied.
Can you see that? Okay.
And I saw the chat bubble pop up, but then, oh, there it is. Oh, I found it. Okay.
Excellent. Have you had a chance to work with him at all?
Yeah, I've met him on a couple occasions, and I went to a day-long retreat, silent retreat in Boise, and
excellent.
He's also very involved with like the neurobiology and like the really scientific studies around meditation. So he's got a pretty just really some depth to his understanding and what he brings to kind of the modern day practices.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I will, yes, I'll get that one going on the list and see if I can do the same thing and meet him.
Cool.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So, Dr. Brian, when you go to a Buddhist temple, do you just show up and say hello and they let you inside? I'm just curious, like, do you have to call ahead and let them know you're coming? What's the deal?
Most of them have public hours. So
okay.
yes, you can just show up. And so I'm happy to encourage you, if you saw a Buddhist temple somewhere where you're at, just show up. And And so there is a tradition. When you arrive, you'll light three incense sticks often as you arrive. You'll be taking your shoes off at an appropriate place, and they are more than pleased, typically, if to meet with you, talk with you. And in my case, they were always happy to do introductions to meditation for my students and answer their questions. They were just always wonderfully open. To do that typically takes an appointment, but often you would be very welcome to come into most temples during normal hours of the day, and I don't know of any day that they wouldn't be open. But so no, it's a very refreshing experience anytime I've done it. So sure, go for it.
Okay, cool.
So what isn't Buddhism? Now that you've had a chance to study Hinduism, and before we launch on this, does anybody need to take a break?
Yeah, I can use a break.
Why don't we take 5 minutes and do a break? This is a good time. Okay. So I've got 33. Let's get back together somewhere around 37, 38. Okay.
Okay.
Or whatever your
good.
clock is saying.
Bueno.
Good.
Looks like Kate's ready. How you doing, Ian?
I'm ready.
All righty, let's get going. I hope you enjoy being able to contrast now what you've studied Hinduism to what you have a sense of or what you're beginning to study, and that's Buddhism. I think it's one of the most important parts of the course is having this privilege of studying what Buddhism is not. And so that begins hopefully to give you a sense of what Buddhism is. And so Buddhism is rejecting parts of Hinduism. And we struggled with what the Brahman was, that designated one, the real, the ground. We certainly recognize that that wasn't the only name that they used within Hindu understandings. There seem to be a lot of names for the one, the real. And so, but Buddhism is going to throw that idea out. The other thing that is that which goes with it, because the Atman, that which is inside of you, your true self, is identical with the Brahman. So if you're throwing out the Brahman, then you're also throwing out the Atman. And for me, that's the one thing that I struggle with Buddhism is their loss of the true self, and what they will call the no self. And you'll get a sense of they're clearly identifying their no self. But I found the Atman idea to be helpful in Hinduism. Very similar to the religions of the book that talk about the soul, that there's something there. And so for me, it's a struggle within Buddhism to lose the Atman. Ian, you're working on something?
Yeah. This was one piece that I picked out from my reading as far as just a big difference, the Atman as opposed to the Atatman. And you said, you described it as the Buddhists have a loss for the sense of self. And I was just curious if, I don't know, I feel like maybe the Buddhists just speak to the self differently, or maybe they relinquish speaking to the self at all in non-attachment. I'm wondering if. Well, I'm looking for a little more.
Yeah, we'll come back to it. It's
okay.
It's more that we're not going to have that sense of the soul, the Atman, that which is within you. We're going to have to be looking for something else. And so it will be our responsibility to figure out what no self is. And what is it that you're searching for? Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to leave the ground as what we're leaving, not what we're finding. But we will we will work out of that.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the third is, or another one, is the way out of samsara, because knowing your real Atman is intrinsic to your path of knowledge. And so if you're not chasing the real Atman, then there is no knowledge of how to find the Atman within you. And then that carries right through to the Brahman. And within Hinduism, that's your liberation, that's moksha. From the cycle caused by ignorance, desire, and karma. So we're leaving a lot behind when it comes to our movement now into Buddhism, and it's important that we recognize that which we learned isn't carrying now into our present understanding of Buddhism, and so we'll have to re-identify. And again, I'm throwing all these terms at you. You should have had today, but you don't. The Buddhist terms will be on the website as hopefully tomorrow. And Kate will have noticed that I still haven't got the Hindu quiz done, and my apologies. And so I will struggle to get it done. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm busy for the next week too, so it's okay
struggle.
if it takes a little
Yeah.
longer.
I'll struggle, but I'll try and do it. I've got some
Okay.
time tomorrow that has emerged that I can use. So we'll see how far I can push into that project tomorrow. I find these little quizzes to be among the most difficult to find the time to do them. They are wonderfully intensive projects. They seem so simple when you take them.
Yeah,
They're
I wouldn't
so
know.
tough to write. So tough to write. Having way too many
Gosh.
students complain about the quality of questions. It just almost freezes you in trying to write them in the future. But
That makes sense.
anyway, I've
Just-
only got some good excuses like my wonderful students sometimes.
I have to run outside because the neighbor's asking a favor of me real quick. So I'll be like
Way
maybe
you
a
go.
couple minutes.
So tell me, we'll talk about something else. Way you go, Ian. So Kate,
Yes.
tell me about your family or something.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
is this an older sister, younger sister? What's going on here?
she's my younger sister. She's 22, and I'm the oldest of 6. So got mixed family. My parents are divorced, both remarried. Other siblings
Well,
from
you've
those
got a blended
marriages.
experience coming at you. Oh, that was such a challenge at our wedding, trying to figure out the blended stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Who gives, who takes, who does, who doesn't. Oh, that's challenge. So blessings on all those decisions coming at somebody.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, good. So that's a challenge.
Mhm.
And so is everybody going to be there to make it wonderfully interesting?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh,
It's the first
fun.
time our family is coming together like this, all of us in one place, and it's gonna be fun.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
looking forward to it. I think
Oh.
it'll bring our family closer.
it will. And
Mhm.
that's the great joy of these is that because if that's your goal, you've got a good shot of hitting it. That
Yeah.
people will become closer and they'll put away what was naturally the animosity of the past and find a new path. So good luck to you in that one. Oh boy. Well, good. So
Yeah.
you've got 6 kids, and and you're the oldest. Very good. So
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
fun.
This loving kindness practice is very relevant.
Good.
On my way down here, I was like, I'm just gonna give them love no matter what. It's the time for that with all the stress and just being
Remember that
positive
clicker.
and loving. Yep.
Keep that clicker going. I want to see how many in a row you can do. I bet you could get a pretty good number.
I'm feeling like I'm on a roll. It's good.
Well, everyone will appreciate it if you can get that number as high as possible.
Right? Yeah.
I'll narrate to you what the average number is of students that do this assignment. It's fun. So that's good. Brothers as well, or is it all girls?
Yeah. So I have 5 sisters and 1 brother.
Oh my word.
Yeah.
What an existence he lives.
Mhm. Yeah.
How old is
Yeah.
he?
So he is 7, or no, he's probably 8 now.
Oh, he's a
So
little.
my dad and stepmom have 3 kids, and so they're 13, 10, and 8. And then there's me and my younger sister Amanda, she's 22, and then my sister Dakota, she's 18 or 19 now.
Oh my.
So yeah, 2 sets of 3 for
Yeah.
my dad.
Blessings upon blessings.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's been great. I listened to the Awakening the Buddha Within while I was cleaning condos this
Oh,
week.
okay. So you got an audio book. Is that what you
And
got?
I do. I have the audio. I will be ordering the
Excellent.
print copy so I can do some highlighting and go back and look at some stuff again. But it's a great book. I'm almost finished. I think I got to.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I think I have like 30 minutes left of the 4 hours.
Oh my
Or
word.
4.5
Well, that's
hours.
the beauty of going on a long trip. You can pile through these books.
Yeah, exactly. I love the audio books, but it's great to set me up for coming, get me in the right mindset, I think,
Yeah.
coming down here.
I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it so far, and no, I'm nowhere near that deep into it. But good. I'm pleased that you've got a good response from it, because it seems really good quality, and his journey is very appropriate to the conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
How does an American effectively live the Buddhist life? And I think he's done a nice job of that.
I agree.
So that's good. Well, good. Well, we'll see if Ian's gonna be gone for a while, or whether we'll.
I think he's back.
I'm here. Yeah.
He's here. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Sorry, my pictures don't show. I'm only getting whoever talks, so I don't have visualization. The way it's set up, and it's not wanting to change. So I'm living with that. So you'll have to interject when that happens.
I will. Thanks for accommodating.
You bet. Vedic scriptures are going to disappear. Obviously, we're going to be then dealing with Buddhist scriptures, and the lesson is, if you change the scripture, you're going to change the religion. It's one of the fascinating parts of Utah, is what happens when you change the scriptures. And Utah is a classic illustration, is you're going to get a brand new religion out of it. And our Latter-day Saints are a classic illustration of changing the scripture and getting a new religion. Religion scholars have long talked about making taking the Mormon tradition, Latter-day Saints tradition, and making it its own major religion. And the major reason is because they have their own scriptures. And so it's an interesting reality. If you change the scriptures, you change the religion. We're going to eject the caste system, and Ian's going to be happy about that.
Yeah.
I think all of us are, but you were the most happy about that rejection, so you'll understand that. And we'll also sort of eject the gods. I'm using a phrase here in my notes that I'll begin to unpack, and I'm calling it an empty theistic. Buddhism is an empty theistic religion. Now, what other choices might I have had when I tried to define the theism of Buddhism? What are the various theisms? If you have one God, it's called monotheism. Sure. You have three gods, it's called
Polytheism.
It's called multiple gods would be polytheism. With three gods, you would get, and it is polytheistic, but we would use that as tritheism. And there are some traditions that are tritheistic. And Christianity is a challenge because it tries to be both monotheistic and tritheistic at the same time. And they call that the Trinity.
The Trinity.
And so Christianity will make our heads spin when we talk about theisms. Now, I choose not to say that Buddhism is atheistic. What's that mean in the American mindset?
No God.
It
God.
technically means no God. And so it's technically, Buddhism is an atheistic religion. I've chosen the term empty theism. They just don't care about God. They don't want to. Atheists tend to argue against God. Buddhists go, who cares about God? There's just nothing there to talk about. So I've just tried to not use the term atheistic, because they're not going to be antagonistic to the theisms. They're just going to not go there. And we'll come back to this. But it is, what we're trying to say is that they have eliminated the worship of the gods. that Hinduism found very important, not because they're polytheistic, but when you look at them, they seem polytheistic. But when you watch the individual practices of the average Hindu, they're monotheistic. They have their own personal god or goddess that they venerate. And so it's a hard conversation even with Hinduism. So that's the challenge of the theisms. Comments? Anything else you've noticed that Buddhism is not?
Mm. No, nothing's coming to mind.
Yeah, me either.
Good, thank you. So let's get going. Buddhism is the story of the Buddha. And that's why our first picture is so fun. I mean, if you're identifying with the story of the Buddha and you've got a completely different story in your venerated idols, then it's intriguing. To be a Buddhist is to follow the path of the Buddha, to identify with the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, and he lived about 2,500 years ago. So that would mean 500 BC. Everybody with me? BCE to be formally correct. 500 BCE. Who else can you think of lived 500 BCE?
Confucius?
Okay. Confucius, yeah, is 500 BCE. Very much. Okay, so if you go into Chinese thought, there's a couple you can talk about. Confucius is around this time. Others? Excellent.
Well, Christ was. I guess he was. No, not that long ago.
Yeah, so Christ, because of our calendar,
It was like
is how many years later?
400 years later.
Yeah, 4,500 years later. Okay, so we really don't put Christ in the same zone as we do with Confucius and Siddhartha Gautama. Any others that you want to think of? Let's just go through the religions. Taoism is a 500 BC founder. You know who that is? Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, and he's a contemporary of Confucius. And so it's interesting to sort of to recognize that. What do we know about Jewish faith? Who's 500 BC within Judaism? Anybody? That's Ezra. Ezra is the person that's bringing the Jews back to Jerusalem. It really is the start of Judaism. We tend to break the Hebrew people from the Jewish people. The Hebrew people are the ancient Hebrews, enslaved and brought out of slavery, created their own nation. They were then taken into slavery again. They were originally enslaved by the Egyptians. They were then enslaved by the Babylonians and then the Assyrians. When they returned to Jerusalem to rebuild the city, the story of Ezra is the key person who begins the story of Judaism. And so he's important within Jewish thought. And so Ezra is 500 BC. Where else could we go? Why don't we go to Greek philosophy? Who's 500 BC in Greek philosophy? Think Bill and Ted.
Who?
Bill and Ted, Great Adventures. You haven't seen this movie?
I did in middle school.
Well, there was this name that came into the Bill and Ted movies. Socrates is how they pronounced it.
Yeah, okay.
Who's that?
Socrates.
Socrates, 500 BC. So Greek philosophy is going to anchor into their thought with Socrates, then Plato, then Aristotle. and that's 550 BC, 500 BC, and 450 BC. So their big three are right in this time zone. Are you catching something about this? What's going on in religion?
Blooming everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah, and so in this zone, not only of location, I mean, these folks aren't that far apart. In 1,000 miles, you could put a circle around, probably, well, yeah, 2,000 miles. You include Confucius. But in this area of active human thought, you have some of your greatest thinkers are hitting the world about 2,500 years ago, about 500 BCE. And we sit around and go, why? What's the logic on why these folks were so powerful? They all were living in the same zone within 100 years of each other. And they were making such profound impact that we're still talking about them. What is it? And there is no answer to it. But we do call this the golden era of religion, is in this zone. And you can really say, excuse me, of philosophy as well. And so it is an amazing period of the human culture itself. The one issue now we notice within Hinduism that we didn't identify a founder. Buddhism, we will. A person started the ideas that we now call Buddhism. Siddhartha Gautama will say, I'm not the first Buddha. He will point to thousands of Buddhas before him. But regardless of his own story and his own narrative, he is going to be assigned by folks that do what I do, that he started Buddhism. And so we do give it a place and we give it a time because we're linear and we do that in our lives. And so we park him on the timeline. But when we come to the Buddha, we don't look at him as divine. He's not a god, nor is he a prophet of God. So who identifies their founder as divine?
Christians?
Christians do, yeah. So they have identified Jesus as divine. Nor is he a prophet of God. Who uses that designation of their founder?
Latter-day Saints.
Latter-day Saints, very much into the prophet. Yep, it's a good one. Who's a little older?
Judaism.
Hinduism.
Oh, I said Judaism.
Judaism has prophets of God. Moses would be considered a prophet of God. Another great name within Jewish thought, and in Hebrew thought specifically. And so another very good one. Can you think of one more? Trying to draw out Muhammad, prophet of God. Okay. So again, this is I'm getting you into the way of thinking that will come into the religions of the book. We'll do all of these kinds of comparisons. As we're learning each religion, we'll intercompare to those. And this is a really good time to say your assignment this week is to read the world scriptures for Buddhism and compare it to Hinduism. Okay? So don't compare it to your personal way of thinking, unless you self-identify as a Buddhist. So you can then be a little more personal about it. But your task this week is to read the scriptures you will find in Buddhism, and you will compare that to Hinduism. So make sure you pick your scriptures carefully. You almost have to think, oh, that compares really well to Hinduism. Not, oh, that's really interesting because of my story. So you've got, when you're reading, you want to relearn your Hinduism and be thinking of it. So try, it's a little tougher this time to do it. So try and read carefully and find the right one that makes sense.
Can we also choose scriptures that are like
very contrasting to Hinduism?
It's your choice whether
How to relate it?
they're similar or contrast. Yep.
Got it.
It's just they have to relate to Hinduism.
Okay.
Okay.
That makes sense.
It's your choice.
Yeah.
And so go for it. So just to let you know, that's the challenge for this week. So the Buddha was a teacher, and he's a model. He's a Templar. He's an exemplar to his followers. And within every religion, the followers venerate their founders. It goes with the territory. They virtually think of them as God. But the challenge for the ages is Siddhartha Gautama will desperately try and flee from that. But you will sense that within his followers that will try and do it. He's just trying to be a teacher. He's trying to be an exemplar. He's not trying to be a divinity. He's not even trying to be a prophet. He just wants to model what his students can do in their lifetimes. And as I've mentioned, he existed many lifetimes before, and there have been many other Buddhas, including our happy Buddha, that we want to use as an illustration of how Buddhism just sort of welcomes everybody into the one amazing project called Buddhism. Comments on that slide? Okay. And so we've already mentioned we're in the 6th century BCE. Both Hinduism, there's one we forgot. The founder of Jainism, we're going to discover 500 BCE. So we'll come back to that when we hit Jainism. I won't worry about names right now. We got lots of that coming at us. But that was such a creative period of religious thought. And when you think of all these authors that are contributing to our way of thinking, Socrates, Ezra, Confucius, Lao Tzu, it's amazing how important they continue to be. And we've had very few since. We've had Muhammad 1,000 years later, Jesus 500 years later, Muhammad 1,000 years later. It's striking how much they contributed for our current existence. But there's some real challengers. The first biography was both mythological and biographical. The first biographer wrote in the 1st century CE. How many years later? Who's my mathematician? You can guess.
I'm lost in the context a little bit.
So if we're going from 500 BCE to around 100 CE, we got a 600-year differential between Siddhartha Gautama living his life and somebody writing it down. Okay?
Yeah.
600 years. Okay. Any religion, how long did it take for somebody to write it down? Pick your religion. Anybody know of any other religion and how long it took to write it?
I don't. I guess what I'm thinking of is Joseph Smith in the LDS religion, but I don't know if that's exactly where you're going.
So what would be your guess between his discovery of the golden tablets and the golden tablets actually being presented to other people? Can you sense how long that might have been? It's easy to say, I think, within one lifetime.
Right, within his lifetime, yeah.
30, 40 years? 30,
Yeah.
40 years, 50 years? I'm not sure precisely, but it was within a lifetime, within 70 years. Jesus's disciples didn't write for 30, 40, 50, 60 years before they wrote it down. Confucius, man, it was second generation that were writing down his stuff. He thought he was hopeless. I mean, he really did. He thought he was a complete failure. But his students realized what he was saying, wrote it down, and transmitted it. So Yeah, that was a really interesting story. And you don't get the scribal sense with any of these founders. None of them were scribes. So they aren't running around trying to write stuff down, except for Joseph Smith and Muhammad. Both of those were very much involved in the scribal management of what they had learned and how they wanted to transmit it. So most founders weren't into that. Socrates, how much did he write? Come on, going back to Intro to Philosophy, how much do we have of Socrates' writings?
I don't know.
Nothing. It's all Plato. Plato is the one who is his student that wrote down the writings of Socrates. We'd have nothing unless Plato had written it down. So you see with these incredible thinkers and really dreamers and living the intellectual life, they were not worried about writing down. And you'll see that within most organizations. It's often the second generation of any organization where they write down what the founders say. And you can talk about Bill Gates, you can talk about Steve Jobs. They didn't run around writing this stuff down. Other people came along and in many cases had to figure out how to transmit what these folks were teaching, because they're creators, they're livers, they're thinkers, they're ideologues. And so you see that in all organizations, that the founders rarely are writers. You hire scribes to do that. You hire writers, you hire accountants, you hire lawyers to write it all down later on. So they're very much in that. But does so that really makes it quite striking. 600 years between when he lived his life and when somebody wrote it down. Now, should you trust that?
To a certain degree.
Haven't you played the telephone game?
Mm-hmm. I have.
You talking to someone's ear, tell them a story, they turn and tell the same story to the next one. 8 people later, how's your story doing?
It's a lot different.
Okay, so in our mind, we've got a problem. Because we've got to worry about 600 years worth of transmission. And that transmission is virtually completely oral, right? It's got to be. If you're waiting 600 years to write anything down, you've got 600 years of oral tradition. Should we worry about it? I would argue no. One of the things I did before I went back to graduate school is I tried to relearn how to memorize. I realized one of the things I'd never been taught is how to memorize well. I'd been taught to put things on 3x5 cards and flip them and learn them in a way that to me was short-term memory, and I knew it because I could do the exam, but the minute I walked out of the exam, I could forget it easily. So it was short-term memory that I was taught. I certainly wasn't taught a mechanism where I could remember something 600 years later. I didn't have that skill. So I was really frustrated coming out of my biology background, because that's all I did was sit around and memorize biology texts. That's just what a biology student does, is you take one text and memorize it, spit it out, another text, memorize it, spit it out. That's all you do as a biologist, is memorize text and spit the stupid things out. And I was never trained to memorize, so it was always sort of this fascinating problem I had. Well, before I left for my graduate studies, I realized I was going to take foreign languages, and I did not want to go through this again. I wanted to learn how to memorize. And so I purposely began studying the ancient mechanisms of memory. And what I discovered is that before we had books, we had fabulous memories, because that's all they had. If you go into the Middle Ages before Gutenberg Press, all people had was their abilities to tell the stories of their forefathers. And I discovered what's called the medieval mind mapping system, where people could memorize thousands of items and memorize it perfectly, and their children could memorize it as equally well, and they could transmit it perfectly from generation to generation to generation for time immemorial.
Wow.
And I realized, wow, that was a skill I didn't have. And they had a way of memorizing that we would call in some ways mnemonics, but it's more than that. It's a mechanism that they could use where they could walk through the Buddhist term list and structure it up and have it memorized within a day and never forget it. Now that's a fascinating way of memorizing things, is to know that what you're memorizing is rock hard and lasts forever, virtually forever.
Yeah.
Now, if we had that kind of memory, pre-literate, people whose lives depended on it, now do you believe they could transmit documents for 600 years virtually intact?
With a lot of practice.
A lot of practice. The most venerated person in Islam to this day, and I saw a biography of this person, is the person that memorizes the entire Quran. Now, I didn't bring a Quran in, but you can imagine you probably got, I think, 700 to 800 pages in the Quran, memorized perfectly. The age of that person, who has the reputation right now of the finest memory work in the Muslim world, in Islam, a 13-year-old boy. Yeah. If you train them, they will know it and know it well. So am I worried that for 600 years there wasn't a written history of Gautama Siddhartha? Wow. It's getting
No, I can see why you're not.
Siddhartha Gautama.
Yeah, I can see why you're not worried about it not being written down for so long.
I'm not, am I? Okay,
No.
but I have to prove that to you because we all learned the telephone game. And we can't imagine that this isn't just a mythological story that someone told, and that there's very little truth left because we are trained on the telephone game, which means everybody that told the story muddled it up as they went along. As opposed to a culture that told the story perfectly to their children, and their children told it perfectly to their children, and their children told it perfectly to their children, and finally, 600 years later, somebody wrote it down.
So would you say,
okay?
would you say that this is how they passed on the Vedas too, until the Vedas were written down for Hindus?
Yes.
I mean, I would say I had a similar question in my mind just because of that background with telephone game.
Excellent. Yeah,
Sure.
I didn't use it as explicitly in that, but you now see how it works. If you're trained on long-term memory, you can memorize things and they don't go anywhere. Pardon?
Do you think that the hymn aspect, the fact that they sung the Vedas, would make
Excellent.
it easier to remember?
For
Maybe?
exactly the same reasons we sing today, because it teaches our children what we want them to learn, and they learn it in a. I mean, I'm always amazed, but with people singing along to all of their rock stars, it just seems natural to them. But it's illustrating how permanent the memory is to music. And if you give it a story, and all the medieval mind map is a very fascinating story that they're trained to walk through their lives. You can see how they can do it, and you can watch people just sing along with all the rock stars in their documentaries, and you do too. Yeah. So yes, music is a wonderful illustration of how this works. Thank you. So in the biography of the Buddha, we're going to discover wandering aesthetics. Now that we've got a picture of a wandering aesthetic, think of that sort of Jesus-like person that I had as a picture of the wanderer. in Hinduism. Those are the important religious figures. They have very little definition. They have very little clothes. They have not much to eat. And they have been called to go to the forests. Within Hinduism, you saw that the final call was to go to the forest and live the ascetic life. And so they would go by the thousands into the forests and try and find their Atman. And when they do that, their intention with the Brahmin establishment, which has built the temples and has built the infrastructure of religion in dominant Hindu thought. And so the wandering aesthetics are rejecting that. And so they're saying nuts to that. And they become very, very important into the Buddhist life. But when they get out into the forest, they don't often stay alone. They get around the campfire. And just like every good seeker and student through the ages, they ask the same questions we're going to ask. What the heck is karma? What in the world is enlightenment? What is samsara? What is rebirth? What is liberation? What they want to know these answers. In the same way, all of us want to ask the questions of who am I, but also what am I? Why am I on this planet? What's my job? What do I do? And Siddhartha is going to be searching for those truths. He's going to experience an amazing awakening. He's going to find an amazing truth, an ultimate truth. He's going to become the Buddha. And so when we say the Buddha with an article meaning one, he becomes that person. And then he's going to teach a community that's going to last for 45 years. And we're going to come back and sort of think about what the value of that is. But his teachings are going to be the ultimate truth. And as the book Awakening the Buddha is going to talk about, finding truth for most people is synonymous with finding God. There's going to be a similarity there. So Buddhists are going to be quite happy when they found the truth, that they are going to have a similar experience to other religious people that are going to find God. Because when you look at it, finding the truth and finding God are incredibly close, if not the same thing. And so the Buddhists are going to simply do it a little different way. They're going to find something that in their minds is true, that folks around them will be amazed at and will understand why they believe, and in lots of cases believe it themselves. And that can be found by others. Okay, I think this is a pretty good time to bag it. And then next week I'll launch into the formal history of the Buddha again. And I'm sure you've heard it, but we're going to talk about it again and try and give some meat to the bones of the Buddha's history. So I think I'm going to stop today and just go where you'd like to go for a few minutes, or we'll just bag it. Final thoughts, things you're already thinking about within Buddhism, places you'd like me to concentrate as far as Buddhism itself. We want to get into health and healing, so that's my agenda, is driving this story of the Buddha to health and healing. But I'd also love to hear what your agenda is for Buddhism. What do you want to think about most when you come to your understanding of Buddhism? Any pearls you might want to place on our table?
Well, so far I really like contrasting the different religions. I like to see the similarities and the differences, and how they do relate to each other. So I'm just appreciating the greater context of this whole course to do that. Something that stood out to me that you said earlier was like, why has Buddhism become so popular in America to our culture, even though it's, we've watered it down or done whatever we've done with it. That's a curiosity to me.
Excellent. No, we must come to that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kate, what's your sense of what you want to discover in the Buddhism section?
I am very interested in learning history, I think, or I guess with these religions that I've dabbled in, essentially being Hinduism and Buddhism, just these ideas that I think about often. I have no historical context or no idea of how they fit into the real world sometimes. I just have these philosophies or bits of ideas. I mean, I've read a lot of Buddhist teaching up to this point, but yeah, no historical context really, other than maybe what I gathered in the first time I attended this lecture with you, but I don't think I made it through Buddhism all the way. So I'm just excited to get the context of everything all together.
Wonderful. I think we can accomplish on both of your agendas. Thankfully, that's my role is comparative religion. So I can help Ian on that goal. And creating wholeness, I'm sensing, is Kate's goal. Trying to take all these fragments of religions that float around us and trying to create a sense of wholeness to that. I think that's a great goal. So if I've heard you well, that's what I think we can do really well together. And I get a kick out of it too, just trying to sort it out. Any last thoughts? Okay, do you have a sense of your challenges? Think about your what you can wear, and I appreciate you won't be wearing orange as you go down the aisle with your younger sister. That probably won't be the chosen color. But at some point, try yellow or orange. At some point, offer something to others. And fruit is a wonderful gift to others. We don't often give fruit in American culture. And so if it's flowers, that's wonderful. But be thinking of what you can give away. And make that a journey specifically this week, but throughout Buddhism. Loving kindness will be a goal. And this week for your reading, world scriptures, primary texts. Get into them and compare them to
Hinduism.
Thanks, folks.
Yeah.
It's been a joy to study with you. Any final questions? I'll stay on until you're gone. If you're gone, you must not have any questions. So have a great week, okay?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Bye
Yeah.
now.
Thank you both. Good to see you.
Thank
You
you.
as well. Good night.
Good night.
Okay.
Mhm.